I want to welcome you guys to a hidden little corner of my mind, sort of a feeling of where I come from and how I think. And one of the challenges that we have as we engage in this online learning environment is that you're far away from me, I'm far away from you. We don't get an opportunity for the interpersonal connection, face to face, body to body, in a way that you do in a normal classroom. And of course, we're working with persuasion, we're working with advocacy, and we're trying to identify some core truths so that we can move forward to develop our advocacy skills. And one of the things that we're going to do this semester is storytelling, and I'm going to ask you to share stories about yourself. They can be funny, they can be sad, they can be some mixture of the two, in a way for you to get to know each other, for me to get to know you, and for you to get to know me. And I thought that a nice way to do that, and a nice way to also maybe model some of the things that we do when we tell stories, and to give you a sense of who I am as a human being and as a person. Not that it matters to you, although since I'm your professor this semester and you're paying money for this LLM and you're interested in these deeper issues that come at an advanced level, well, they might. So what I'm going to do is, I've told you, now I'm going to show you, and then later on it'll be your opportunity to do. So I will expect you to provide to the rest of us a video that we can then share, and we'll work out the details of how you record it and how you post it and how you get it to me at a later date. There are a lot of different ways that we can do it. But I wanted to sort of begin our time together this semester with some self-reflection and disclosure. And what I thought I would do is bring you to a recent event in my life and tell you the event through the rubric of a story of kind of how it happened, so that you get a sense of it. All right, let's get started. I grew up in Alabama, not in just any part of Alabama, but the northern part of Alabama, where the hills of Tennessee and the Appalachian Mountains empty out into the Tennessee River. And it's a place where cotton has grown for hundreds of years, where the Native Americans fought and almost destroyed DeSoto in the 1500s, and where my family has been running around in some fashion for an extended period of time. Well, about 3 or 4 months ago, I got a phone call, and maybe actually I think it's longer than 3 or 4 months ago now. It must be, this is August, so 8 months ago. I got a phone call, and it was one of those unexpected phone calls that you get sometimes, right? It was a call that came in the middle of the night from a number that I didn't recognize, and it rang directly to my home phone. So I picked up the phone, and as you might expect, it was news that was not good news. It's the type of news that we get as we get older. My father's had a stroke. My uncle's on the phone, and my uncle's about 89 years old. Grew up in Tennessee and Alabama, and he talks like this, and every other sentence is peppered with a word or a phrase that you probably don't hear anymore if you're not from Alabama, Georgia, or Tennessee. And he says, "Charles Harris," and he calls me Charles Harris because my middle name is Harris, and if you grow up in the Deep South, the middle name is the way in which the adults make certain that you know that you're still the child and they're the adult. So he calls me Charles Harris. He says, "Charles Harris," he says, "your dad's had a stroke, and it's not good. If you want to see him, you need to come home." Now, coming home means getting in the car, driving all the way through Florida, up into Alabama, all the way up Alabama, and all the way across Alabama, almost to the corner of Alabama where Mississippi, Tennessee, and Alabama meet. That's where my father's been living about the last 15 or 20 years. I have not seen this man in over 10 years. Now think about that for a moment. For 10 years, I haven't seen him. But I do what children do. I do what the oldest child does. I get in the car, and I start driving. And we've all been in those situations in our lives. If you haven't, you will be. Where as you drive, there's not much to do but to drive and to think and to think and to drive. And so that's what I'm doing is I'm going up the highway in Florida in the middle of the night. And I cross the Alabama-Florida line, about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, south of a little bitty town called Dothan and Enterprise. And if you've ever been to Alabama, to Dothan and to Enterprise, they're famous for a couple of things: cotton, boll weevils, and peanuts. And you can smell the roast peanuts drifting across the air as I'm pulling into Dothan on Highway 231 and the sun's coming up. My dad loved peanuts. He was the kind of guy who would roast them in the oven, boil them in a pot, eat them raw. He would take them, shell them, put them in a 6.5-ounce bottle of Coke, drink the Coke, and eat the peanuts while drinking the Coke. So peanuts in my life have always been associated with my father. And so as I'm pulling into Dothan that morning, the smell of peanuts are in the air. And it's like I'm 5 years old sitting in the front seat of the truck getting ready to go fishing. That's what it's like. And so I get out of Dothan, and we get up, and I'm going up 231 towards Montgomery, and then on to Birmingham. And in Montgomery, you can smell, you get outside of Montgomery, you can smell firewood burning. And I look over, and they've pushed up great big piles of scrub. And it's what they do is they come in and they bulldoze it all together. And then they set it on fire to clear land to build houses. Well, when I was a boy, we used to do that for firewood. And I can't count the number of times that I sat on one end of a crosscut saw and my father sat on the other, and we sawed wood together. Now, if you're not from the Deep South and if you didn't grow up in the 60s or the 50s or the 40s, you may not even know what a crosscut saw is. If you've ever seen a cartoon with Paul Bunyan, or it's a big long saw that's about 6 to 8 feet long, and it's got 2 handles on it, and it's just a long piece of steel. There's a really interesting thing about using a crosscut saw. You cannot use it unless both of you are working together with the saw. One has to push when the other one pulls. You have to keep it straight. You have to be in literal physical rhythm with one another to make the saw function. Now, my dad was not the kind of guy who said, "I love you." He was not the kind of guy who expressed those sorts of feelings. And he was a hard taskmaster. But as I drove up into Montgomery and could see that scrub burning, I got to thinking about maybe what lessons were behind all that firewood that we cut. And at the time, the only thing that I knew was that I was tired and I was hungry and I did not want to be on the other end of that saw. But I was. And that was something that, looking back on it, my father taught me. The value of work, and the value of work in harmony with another human being. I don't know if he meant to teach it or not, but I know that I learned it from him. And so I get up through Montgomery and into Birmingham, and you come out of Birmingham, you climb up the mountains into what my father always called God's country. He thought of northern Alabama as the promised land. It's a beautiful place that's filled with red clay and a lot of family history. And that red clay matters because later on that week, I'm going to be standing by a graveside, and we're going to be putting him into that red clay ground. And it's exactly the sort of funeral that you'd expect. But it's not time for that yet. So I drive past the red clay outside the hills of Birmingham, Alabama. I go up and I go over to Sheffield. Sheffield is a place that the 1940s and the 1950s forgot. The rest of the United States moved on, and it has a place. The place hasn't changed much, and it looks like it. I pull into the parking lot of Helen Keller Hospital. And it's named after Helen Keller because Helen Keller grew up in Sheffield, Alabama. And I go inside, my uncle and my aunts, the Rose clan, if you will, are all downstairs. Time to go up and see my dad. So I get in the elevator, I go upstairs. I walk into the room. Now, my parents divorced when I was 14 years old. I am at this point 52 years of age when I go to see my father. They have been divorced for 38 years. My dad never remarried. My mother managed to marry and kill at least 3 other men before she finally gave up on marriage. So I go in to see him. He weighs about 110 pounds, about 5'8". He's not in good shape. He's not in good shape. So he's lived a life that's the kind of life that you don't want to live, but that some people do. A lot of alcohol. I asked him, I said, "What'd you have for breakfast yesterday?" His response was vodka. So that sort of gives you a feel for where he was in life at that point. So there's a lot of bad road over the last 30, 40 years between he and I, where I didn't get the expectations of what I thought a father should be, and he didn't have the life that he thought that he should have had. So he's sitting there. He knows he's dying. I know he's dying. Everybody knows he's dying. And it's one of those moments where you think, well, what are we going to talk about? So I said, "Well, Dad, how you feeling?" He says, "Well, I feel about like you'd expect." I said, "Well, a lot of things have happened to us over the years. Is there anything that you want to share with me? Anything you want to say about, how your life went, how our life went, about our family? Is there anything that you want to get off your chest or just share?" And he looked at me from the bed and he goes, "No, I ain't got nothing to say about that. I ain't got nothing to say about that." I leaned back in the chair and I thought, well, son of a gun, after all this time and all this road, there's not going to be anything. There'll be no closure. There'll be no nothing. How can you be like that? And he gazed off through the window. And looking out the window, not looking at me, not looking at anybody else in the room, he goes, "How's your mother? How's your mother doing?" Except, of course, my daddy says, "How's your mama?" And it suddenly hit me that after 38 years of divorce, after a life spent trying to deal with his expectations with alcohol, as he's lying in the bed, the only thing he has on his mind, is the fact that he's worried about my mother. And I thought that was such a wonderful example of how at the core of each of us, there's something or someone that no matter who we are or what we do or how we are, that we love and that we care about. And when we laid him in the ground a few days later, the last lesson that my father taught me was that there are people who you love and never let go, no matter what. That was a phenomenal gift that my dad gave me. And I wanted to share it with you. I wanted to share it with you through the rubric of a story, to open myself up as a human being to you, to let you get some sense of who I am, the things that have happened in my life. And if you'll think about that story for a moment, as I told it to you, and by the way, pretty much every word of it, you'll notice that I have to edit. After 22 years in the Army and 18 years in Alabama, I have a tendency to be a little bit too direct sometimes, and so I'm trying not to put any gosh darn words in the video that would be inappropriate. But you'll notice that I used details of the world to draw the pictures of the story, to give you a sense of my father that has nothing to do with how he was physically present in the world, but everything to do about how he was emotionally present in my life, how he remains emotionally present in my life today. And to do that requires me to be willing to be vulnerable in this setting with you. Requires me to be willing to trust you to take the story that I give you, to agree with it or disagree with it, but to at least honor it. And now that I've done that with you, you ought to be able to do that with all of us in this Advocacy LM this fall. And I want you to record a story from your life. I do not care if it's a happy story or a sad story or an in-between, but I want it to tell us something about you. I want you to have the goal to share something about yourself that none of us would otherwise know. And the reason that I'm doing this from a teaching perspective, because a lot of you are in this LLM because you're thinking about someday being a teacher, is that I have a need, I have an overwhelming need to establish credibility and communication with you. And I can only do this if I open the door to communication. And given the constraints of technology, the best way to do this is to use the concepts of tell, show, and do, which is what I've just done. And now it's your turn to do it. I need you to record a story for each of us. Once you've recorded it, if you know how to upload it to YouTube as a private link, do so, and I'll put it in our class. If you don't know how to do that, don't worry about it. Just get it on a video camera, and then I'll talk you through the rest. This is an important point and an important piece in our journey together as students, professors, and colleagues. We need to all have some skin in the game so that we're focused as we go forward. I really look forward to learning something about you personally in whatever setting you think is appropriate. And I look forward to our time together, because we're going to have a really good time and we're going to get to know each other. Because in the end, caring about other people is pretty much the only thing that matters. I'm going to let you go on now and hit your next lesson. Get those videos to me. Talk to you soon.